Kingdom. Anyway, I'll pass over. Let me pass over to Norman, who should take the credit for this, and I'm sure I will admit.
Well, we kicked this off in February, and it's great that Louis is here because he helped us start this in February, and was very much, if you like, the catalyst behind the whole thing. And really, what I'm doing tonight is trying to summarize what we've been doing on behalf of our Beeline team, which is Camilla, Deb, and Hilary. We started off, we wanted 3 general aims around the idea of building this. We called it Beeline. We didn't really understand that it meant biodiversity line when we kicked off, but sure enough, we're trying to create some sort of biodiversity corridor. So 3 aims then: establish, lay the foundations, if you like, for this Beeline, and within that, discover the existing wildflower meadows. And then our contribution will be to add new meadows to that, to help insect pollinators. That's the bottom line, as it were. We have to find the people who are willing to help create this biodiversity line, and then also study and record what we're finding. So those are the 3 things. And I'd like to here sort of pay tribute to the parish council that gave us some funding to underlie this project. Bug Life, Louis' organization, which was a great, also provided us some financial support, but really was the catalyst with the brilliant idea. And then Surrey Wildlife Trust, which I think is recognizing what we're doing now and also encouraging us. So anybody who's aware of nature knows that we've got this huge biodiversity problem all over the world and in all sorts of ways. In fact, we're sort of presiding over this 6th extinction of life on the planet at the moment. And specific to the UK, we have this biodiversity problem of a great loss of wildflower grassland areas. There's the statistics, it's quite frightening. And then of course, a decline in flying insects and particularly the pollinators that is our concern. So that's our problem, if you like, that's UK specific. And the idea of beelines, which I was introduced to by Louis at a Surrey Wildlife Trust webinar in November, I think is a brilliantly simple idea, but it's a way of trying to focus attention on the biodiversity loss problem and provide a solution by simply creating fairly narrow corridors that crisscross the country, into which we put a lot of effort into increasing biodiversity. And in our case, of course, focusing on the idea of cultivating wildflowers for insect pollinators. So that, if you like, to me, it was the catalyst for this whole idea of what we're doing. If you put the Surrey beelines on the map, then Betchworth sits towards the east of that network of lines. And our idea was simply to create like a north-south corridor that intersected the existing beeline, and therefore, add something to the national project. So making a start then, January, we had a team meeting and we produced a promotional leaflet, worked out what we wanted to do. We did a pitch to Betchworth Parish Council, which was successful in securing some funding. We had our kick-off on February the 8th Zoom meeting, and then the hard work was to go door to door around North Betchworth. And I think all the team were quite infused by the reception we got as we knocked on doors, and people, we had conversations with people. Many people were aware of the sort of problem that we're trying to tackle. People got it immediately and wanted to join in. And we then entered negotiations. Louis gave us some advice on seed purchasing and also gave us some seeds. And we also used his supplier, Boston Seeds, to buy more seeds. In March, we distributed the seeds, we packaged, you can see us there packaging them up, distributed them, and offered some advice on how to sow them. So that was, if you like, the start of it. What we're trying to do then, and we borrowed Bug Life's idea of field pot or plot as our tagline. So we wanted people to try and commit to giving up a bit of space in their gardens or planting a container and sowing some wildflower seeds, and then also encouraging them to leave their lawns uncut at least until July. So those were the 2 main things we were asking. But a lot of this is about trying to understand what insect pollinators we actually have in our environment. These are the main groups of pollinators. And so part of our study is, part of our efforts are to study what's there. And this is where Josh comes in, and Josh will tell us all about what he's doing in a short time. Okay, geology wise, we've got, it's quite simple geology, but there's a great variation within that simplicity. So if we think of look at the cross section at the bottom there from north to south, we have at the top chalk, and that chalk then spills off, if you like, in the downhill creep across the green sand and the galt, and then to the south we've got Wealden clay. So we've got a mixture of very calcareous soils, some of them very thin, some of them a bit thicker, sandy, loamy soils and clays. That's the typical mixture in our area. And after taking advice from Louis and Boston Seeds, we came up with this generic seed mix, which most of the residents have used in their planting, which includes, as you can see, a loamy soil mix, calcareous mix, some cornfield annuals to give us some showings this year, and some yellow rattle, very importantly. And you can see there, we're looking at round about 50 species that we're trying to introduce, and in a sense, that's our attempt at increasing biodiversity in the area. We're recognizing 3 types of wildflower habitat through this. Firstly, the new cultivations that we're trying to create, established wildflower cultivations, and then the natural wildflower meadows in the form of gardens, fields, and other things that are there. In a summary then, we've got about 40 residents and businesses participating. Most cultivations are quite small, usually only a few square meters in size, but we have got some larger commitments. And I think if we top them all up roughly and conservatively, I think we're aiming at about 1,400 square meters of new cultivation, assuming that all that actually generates. We're currently trying to get feedback from those people who are participating. It looks like seeds have been sown from mid-March through to early May, so great variation there. We've had quite a good germination rate, some failures in some areas, but generally good germination rates, but small amounts of growth, obviously, in that time. And the sort of conclusions that we might come to at this stage is that weather's interfered with early spring sowing, and so people delayed. The perennials are very unlikely to reach maturity this year, and really we are laying the foundations for next year in terms of what we're doing, and we can clearly build on what we've done already by sowing in the autumn. This year's been a bit of an unusual one. Well, last year was unusual as well. Maybe every year is unusual, but March and April were cooler than average, and April was much drier than average if you look at that graph above. So many participants delayed sowing, and this quote from a participant sort of expresses that. Due to the cold weather and heavy rains, I chose to sow the seeds at the beginning of May. Many different seedlings have germinated, but they're very small. That seems to embody very much the experience of many people who are participating in here. So trying to create new wildflower habitats. There's Miller in the top left there, having helped a neighbour dig her patch. And on the right there, here's her recent photograph of what it looks like now. So it doesn't look very promising, but it's there. The seeds are there. They're in the seed bank, and hopefully they will germinate, if not this year, next year. And another one at the bottom there, Peter and David, they're on chalk. And again, there's quite a lot of stuff growing, but that no one is really sure whether they are the weed seeds which are already in the seed bank or they're new. And then on the right-hand side, from Sawkins Architects, there's some containers that were sown with the seed, and there you can see quite clearly, probably fairly weed-free compared to what we're seeing in the gardens. Here's my experiment. In March, as you can see, I dug quite a large area. I took off the turf and then put the turf into piles, and then put a little bit of compost in with the clay. I'm on quite heavy clay soil. By April, I had quite a lot of germination, but also quite a lot of weeds showing. And the current view as of today is shown at the bottom there. Quite a lot of growth, a lot of grass is coming through now, but a lot of weeds like thistles coming through, but also a lot of new plants, which I know were not there before. The hope and the vision, though, I think is embodied in James's garden, Potter's Farm, and Goulburn Green, which are now quite well established wildflower cultivations. And I think we need to bear that in mind when we're just seeing our initial stumblings and fumblings towards creating these things. But the other vision I have is you just look around at where we leave nature to take its course. Fraser Down, the top there, Broome Park, a resident's garden and road verges, and all around us, nature takes its course and produces lovely wildflower meadows and mini meadows for us to see. So in a sense, that is also our vision, and that is also that we have to recognize within our biodiversity line. And these are the things that we'll be trying to map. So Katie Leake sent us these lovely photographs of her garden, quite well established now. She's left several years her garden to be mown, and you can see there lovely orchids and daisies and cowslips, cowslip parsley, and lots of things there happening just through leaving the garden. So again, another vision of how we might populate our area. So beginning a wildflower pollinator biodiversity corridor looks something like this, where you start mapping in the existing cultivations and natural wildflower environments, and then the new cultivations on top of that. We can start building a picture of, I think the idea of little stepping stones within a corridor seems to be quite appropriate for the sort of pattern that we are seeing. And of course, if we can show this to residents, then other people might well join in with our project. What might a wildflower biodiversity map look like? Well, I've just taken here, I think this is a satellite image, and onto it, putting on the sorts of habitats that we can see there. And we can then tag those habitats in some way and link them to photographs and databases of the sorts of plants and animals, for that matter, that we see in them, the insect pollinators. And the same goes for our insect pollinators, photographic records, and also digital text-based records as well, which Josh will talk about in a minute. So in terms of going forward then, May, July, we're involved with, now we're trying to get feedback from our participants. We're beginning the insect pollinator surveys, which Josh will talk about. We are looking towards offering a wildflower wander on National Meadows Day, which we might talk about right towards the end. We're going to offer an invitation to submit photos from people who are participating to try and create an online exhibition. We'll produce a summer issue of Rebee magazine, and we'll certainly be celebrating this wildflower project. And then we're hoping to make some beeline movers as well. So I think that's basically it in a nutshell. I think we've made a very solid start, and we're laying the foundations for the future. But we must, go forward with hope and vision, not just for this year, but for next year also. So that's my initial summary.
Thank you, Norman. Thank you. You're very good at putting all this information in a form which I can understand. So thank you. Look, very graphic. Excellent. Terrific. And anyone got any questions at this point before we move over to talking about the insect surveys? Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And I've just got an observation to make, Norman. You're on heavy clay, so are we. It wouldn't normally be recommended to add compost because wildflowers like low fertility. You'd been better off adding sand.
Yeah, I did mix in there sand as well, Claire, but it was really the finest bit of compost on there, because when I took that top layer off, and it was really like, dreadful looking clay underneath, and I just pressed I literally just scattered a bit of handful of compost on the top and pressed the seed with sand and pressed the seed into that. And it does seem to have worked. But the other thing I noticed was that there was far better growth on top of the overturned bits of grass, with a bit of clay in the bottom. So they were obviously a bit richer, I think, in organic material.
There you go. Rachel, any questions from you so far? You're muted. Rachel, you're muted.
There we go. I just think it's really exciting, and I moved from the edge of Dorking where we were on Chalk Meadow and we had lots of wild orchids in our lawn. Beautiful. So I'm interested to see what we can do in Buckland, really, just to extend the area.
Thank you. Okay, if no more questions,